to episode number 14, and today starts a two-part series on how to communicate better with the men in your life. So I'm going to turn it over to Mom, and she's going to share some tips and helpful things to keep in mind when you're talking to a man.
All right. There's a book that was put out a few years ago called Women Are Crowbars and Men Are Clams. Kind of a funny book, but sometimes you might feel like that trying to draw out your husband's feelings. You know, a study was done that said that only 7% of our communication is with our words. We women tend to love to talk and use our words and tell our stories. But you know, there's other ways that we communicate, and we're going to be talking about some of those things and how important they are. You know, we women, we like to sit across from each other and just talk and tell our stories and all. Men generally feel a little bit more comfortable rather than just having somebody stare at them and while they're talking. Sometimes that feels a little bit of a confrontive or combative. So they do better generally more shoulder to shoulder. Maybe riding in the car, or if you're at a restaurant, sitting beside your husband, or going for a walk together. So you want to help facilitate your conversation in a way that men are comfortable with. And we need to also understand his emotions. You know, we women, we know how to describe our feelings and our emotions in so many ways. Men sometimes have a hard time really explaining how they're feeling, and they can sound angry or upset, but we need to be able to help them understand their feelings. Like if they came home from work and in a bad mood, instead of reacting to them, we can say, oh, I can understand how irritated you must be about what happened at work, or how depressing that was to have that happen to you. And it just helps a man to be able to feel like there's a way to describe his feelings other than anger. Also know his toleration level. We women can go on and with our friends and talk for hours, and I encourage you to have a Titus 2 friend who will encourage you in the right ways and all. But men get overwhelmed by a multitude of words. Too many words don't help. So be careful about just overwhelming your husband with all these words. And be aware that there are some barriers that can hinder communication with your husband or your father or your brothers. Unforgiveness. If you have an attitude against your husband and you haven't forgiven him for some things, he can sense that. And that makes it hard for him to open up. The Bible has a verse in Colossians about how a husband is told not to be bitter against his wife. Well, sometimes we can do things that kind of set the seeds for those bitterness. So we need to watch that we're not feeding a bitter attitude in our husbands toward us because we don't respect him, or we don't accept him, or we don't really give him a chance to talk without us interrupting. So those are some things to be careful about with your husband. And we need to have tact. Tact is an important skill, and we're going to use it as an acrostic. We did a Titus 2 series up in the mountain for women, and there were so many practical tips that these women were just so appreciated learning. And tact, let's describe it this way. You need to have the right tone of voice. I mean, you can say something like, I care about you, or says, I care about you. You know, tone of voice is a big thing. Also our actions. If you told your husband that you loved him and then slammed the door in his face, your actions definitely would speak louder than words. And your countenance. You know, our husbands and those that know us, they can read our countenance and they know whether it's safe to talk to us or not, or if we're upset. So be aware of what you're thinking about, because what you're thinking about shows up on your face. We need to take all our cares to the Lord. And also, timing is very important in tact. You don't want, as soon as your husband comes walking in the door, you're going to unload on him all the things that happened to you that day. Give him some time to relax, and then and you don't want to use timing when you're just going to bed and complaining about maybe one of your children is getting bad grades in math or whatever. That's not good timing. So be sensitive, respect your husband, honor him by being careful of your tone of voice, your actions, your countenance, and also be respectful in your timing. We're going to talk more on this subject. So we talked a little bit longer last week. We're going to talk more on this and give you some real practical tips. And you single gals, you've got men in your life, maybe bosses or brothers or fathers. And so I'm hoping that this is helpful for all of you and good training for those that are not yet married, that you can kind of set patterns. I'll tell you one story though. A sweet friend of ours up in the mountain, she and her husband are dear friends, and they've been married for over 50 years. And she told me the story that early on in their marriage, there was a relative visiting, a man visiting one of the uncles, and they were out in the garage working on the car, and she was so excited to hear what they were sharing about. And so when he came in, her husband and the other man left, she says, well, what did you talk about? And he says, well, nuts and bolts and things like that. And she says, honey, why is it that you just talk about nuts and bolts with me and don't share the deep things of your heart? And he said, well, I hate to break it to you, honey, but it's nuts and bolts all the way down through. So it's harder for a man to really share on a deep emotional level. You can imagine how you would feel if you were asked to disrobe in front of a group of ladies. Well, for a man to be a lady trying to be a crowbar and try to get into the deep emotional things he's feeling, that is as unnerving for a man. So don't make expectations that are more likely to be like you and rather than like a man. Honor him, respect him, accept him how he is. And we're going to give some more helpful hints next week.
Okay. And always as a reminder, if you have a suggestion of a topic that you want to hear my mom talk about, then you can always send that to us. You can comment on one of our videos on YouTube or send me a message on Instagram. We do have the Moments with Mom Instagram account. So we do love suggestions. It helps us to know which direction to take our topics in. So always feel free to do that. And we love hearing feedback. We're just recording these in our guest room in our house and throwing them out there on the internet, hoping that they are being a blessing to those watching. And I know it's a great encouragement to my mom to hear back from you all. And so feel free to comment and share those, and I'll share all those with my mom as we get those coming in, and just encourages us to keep making these. So hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you next time.
So long.
Bye.